If you're curious about ways you can reduce your food waste at home and have thought about purchasing an electric composter, I've had mine for a few years and I want to share my thoughts on having it. I've used my Vitamix food cycler for almost 5 years now. I got it during COVID and it's lasted us through an apartment and now in our house. Today, I want to share a few thoughts with you on a few pros and cons for using this machine. I know that there are a lot of electric composters out there nowadays, like the Lumi, I think it is, the Mill, and a couple other ones. Vitamix was one of the first ones that came out on the market. Food waste and more sustainable food practices is something I'm definitely passionate about. So I wanted to share a little bit more about my thoughts on the Vitamix food cycler. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kelly, and this is my channel Made to Sustain, where I help you make more sustainable food choices that are better for you and the planet. All right, so before we get started, I think it's important to know a few quick things about an electric composter and what it does. So really, if you're not familiar, composting in general is taking food waste and vegetable scrap into nutrient-rich material that can be added to soil and then used for things like houseplants, your garden, herbs and shrubs, or just thrown right into your soil mixture to give a great nutrient source for your plants, fruits, vegetables, whatever they may be. Your plants are going to love it. Composting is a great way that you can divert food waste from going into landfill. Now, there's a few different ways that you can compost. I'll reference an article I wrote down below about different ways you can compost in a small space, but composting in general takes a few weeks to months for the food to break down in a bin. So we have a compost bin that I'll show you in just a second. What's great about the electric composters, it accelerates that process from a few weeks or months to just a few hours. So specific to this one, it's really, really simple. You've got your lid here and a bucket, and this one, it's really well loved. You put your food scraps in here. Nowadays, I think they sell a lid that goes on top of it that you can just store it on the counter and run it when it's ready. What we like to do is we just like to keep it in a separate container and fill this one up till whenever it's about filled. There's a fill marker over here, and there's a little knob at the bottom that turns and spins. In addition to adding heat and that turning motion that creates that aeration, that's what breaks the food scraps down in a much quicker process. So just in a matter of like a couple of hours. I think standardly, we like to run ours overnight. So that way, before you go to bed, it'll run overnight. It's pretty quiet. And in the morning, you wake up and you've got some nice fresh compost that's ready to go. So a few things that I like about this machine. It's so easy to use. It could not be simpler. Really, all it is it's the press of a button right here, and the machine will start going. As I mentioned, it's really easy if you have a small space. We use this in our apartment where I didn't have access to a compost bin, and the compost, I'd put it in my plants. I had a balcony and like some houseplants, so I'd just sprinkle the compost in my houseplants once it was ready. And it was great. It was really easy to use. It helped me really understand the basics of composting. What's great about this machine is it can compost things like chicken bones, where typically that's not recommended for outdoor compost or compost bins because animals can get into it and then they can, eat. You don't want rodents in your compost and just inviting vectors for diseases inside your garden and inside your compost. So this machine actually can break down things like chicken bones, which have a lot of nutrients for the garden soil, and it makes a really nice, almost like a filler material. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's super fluffy and it can break it down. Not like huge steak bones, but fragile and delicate like chicken bones, like chicken thighs. This machine will handle it just fine. As I mentioned, this machine makes it really easy for beginner composters to learn how to compost. And it's a great way to learn how to compost and to start understanding the basic fundamentals of composting. If you're somebody who who doesn't have a large space for a compost bin or anything like that, or maybe you're just a little nervous about creating a compost bin and having to, nurture that compost for 6 to 8 months, it's a lot of work, and I totally understand. So this is a great solution for that. As with all good things, there are some downsides to this machine. So my experience with a Vitamix food cycler in general, the machine has, in the back, it has filters. So these filters help keep the smell down to a minimum. The issue is you have to replace them pretty quickly depending on how much you use the Vitamix food cycler. So for me, I think we ended up using ours pretty much daily to a couple times a week, and we would have to replace ours like once a month. Vitamix has since changed this. They've now made these refillable where you used to have to just like buy a new filter every time. So people complained and Vitamix responded, which I think is super cool. I can't speak for the other types of machines like the Lomi or the Mill or any of the other new electric composters that are out there these days. But my experience with this one is if you run it a lot, you will have to change those filters, or you can just, run it at night away from where you're going to be hanging out and you don't have to smell it. It doesn't get like super smelly, but you have to understand that it is decomposing food and that, it is going to cause an odor. This machine can handle a lot of things that I learned are not great for it, but that you can generally compost are things like tea bags. I had to learn these things the hard way. The tea bag, the string will actually get caught on the rotor down at the bottom and it'll get stuck and it'll jam. So you can't put things like tea bags in there. This machine can handle a lot, but the capacity is pretty small. So if you're somebody like me who cooks a lot, this machine can fill up in a day or maybe half the time that you're cooking. One time we were making mashed potatoes and meal prepping for the week, and so I peeled the potatoes, I made a bunch of eggs, I changed the coffee, and then, we were cleaning out the fridge and just ended up with a lot more food waste and food scraps than we were anticipating, and the machine fills up pretty quickly. So if you're somebody who doesn't generate a lot of food waste, or you don't generally like to do a lot of cooking in the kitchen, this amount might be fine for you if you're just running things like coffee grounds and eggshells. But if you're somebody who does a lot of cooking, a compost bin might be a better option for you. But I have a friend who I actually recommended this machine to her. She uses it all the time. She absolutely loves it. And the capacity has never been an issue for her. She doesn't love to cook. So there's definitely a nuance there with how frequently you use it or how much food waste you'll generate in the kitchen versus how much capacity you'll need to run the food Vitamix. And the last con of, the accelerated compost, I think it's important to know that when you're generating compost outside, you've got a lot of time for the soil to aerate, for it to really dry out over time. And I don't know how true this is, but I read this. I think maybe I might have read this in the manual. I read somewhere that you're supposed to wait 10 days before you can actually use the compost. So for me, that was a little bit of a challenge when I was, running the machine every day and generating a lot of compost. It's not quite ready to be used right away. I don't know how true that is, but I read that somewhere and it was a rule I was following when I was using the machine. So just something to think about. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you heard of this rule? Because I'm not quite sure if this is true or just hearsay. Thinking about it now, I don't imagine why it would be a problem to have to use it day of, but I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be right. I'm not an expert in using the compost. I just know how to make it and how to use the machine, which I guess counts for something. Like I said, the machine's really easy to use, and I think it's great for beginners who really want to start reducing their food waste at home, but don't want to, look into getting a giant compost bin that sits in their backyard. One more con, this machine's fairly large. It's not super complicated or super complex, but they call this a countertop composter, but we never left this on the countertop to compost because it just takes up a lot of space. I'd say it's probably about the size of a bread machine. If anybody's mom had a bread machine growing up, that's definitely about the size of a bread machine, I would say. But yeah, so it's fairly large. I definitely would not leave it on the counter, but like I said, we left it running. It sits really nicely on the floor. We have a lot of animals around here. They don't bother it. They don't touch it. They're not really interested in it. So we've just always left it in the corner to run and never had any issues with it, just kind of sitting on the floor, away from like pet water bowls and everything like that. But yeah, it's never been a problem. So I think overall, this is a great machine if you're interested in, dipping your toe in the world of composting. When I got this machine, it was really expensive. I think it was close to like $500. I've seen the machines really come down in cost. So I think Vitamix has released a few newer models. This model today, you can get it for around $200, and I'll link it down below for you. I think it's a really great investment, especially if you're just starting to learn more about composting or looking for a way to start reducing your food waste at home. And if you end up wanting to upgrade to a compost bin, you can always take the compost that's generated here and add it into your compost bin at home. That's definitely not a problem. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to follow along for more. If you're interested in learning more about reducing your food waste in the kitchen, make sure you check out my video on the beginner's guide to zero waste cooking right here. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.